Have you ever woken up after a long night's sleep, feeling more tired than before you went to bed? Not in your muscles, but somewhere deeper, like your soul is heavy. Like the dreams didn't rest you, they drained you. As if you were floating between two worlds and forgot how to land in either. What if sleep isn't always a refuge? What if too much of it is a silent retreat from something you're afraid to face? Imam Al-Ghazali once said, "Sleep is the twin of death." Not just because both disconnect you from the world, but because excessive sleep, like death, can rob your soul of its vitality, if you stay in it too long. There's a kind of sleep that's healing, gentle, purposeful, sacred. But there's another kind, the kind that fogs the heart, dulls the mind, and cloaks your spirit like a thick, forgotten curtain. You wake up, and yet, something inside you doesn't. It feels like you've crossed over to the other side of wakefulness, but without your soul catching up. Avicenna, known in the East as Ibn Sina, spoke of the body as a rhythm. A symphony of cycles and balance. When that rhythm is broken, even rest becomes unrest. Sleep, in its natural form, restores. But when misused, it disorients. The question is no longer, did I sleep long enough? It's, did I wake up alive? Because there's a difference between physical fatigue and spiritual heaviness. You can drink all the coffee you want, but it won't lift the weight of a sleeping soul. Too much sleep isn't always rest. Sometimes, it's retreat, a quiet form of surrender. A slow drowning in silence, where the mind dreams not of hope, but of avoidance. But how do you know the difference? How do you know if your sleep is healing you, or hiding you? That's where we begin. But how do you know if your sleep is healing you or quietly harming you? It's not measured in hours. It's felt, in that strange heaviness you carry upon waking. A fog in the soul, not the body. A disconnection, not from the world, but from yourself. You open your eyes, and the world feels distant. Muted. Like you've returned from somewhere far, and yet, you don't remember the way back. What if that weight you feel in the morning isn't fatigue, but disorientation? Not physical tiredness, but spiritual confusion? According to Al-Ghazali, every night is a death, and every morning, a resurrection. But resurrection requires intention. If the soul returns to a body still shackled by avoidance, by dread, by a silent resistance to life, then waking up becomes nothing more than a reset of the same suffering. Sleep, in excess, becomes a limbo. A wandering between worlds. You're not resting, you're escaping. And the tragedy is this: we don't even realize it. We call it self-care. We say we're tired. But what if the real exhaustion isn't in the muscles, but in the mind trying to carry what the heart refuses to face? Have you noticed? The longer we sleep, the more disoriented we feel. Not always, but often. And not because our bodies needed more rest, but because our souls drifted too far, and struggled to return. This is where the wisdom of Avicenna begins to echo. He didn't just speak of sleep in scientific rhythms, REM cycles and circadian clocks. He spoke of balance, of harmony, that our sleep must mirror the natural patterns of life, not rebel against them. When you sleep through the morning light, you miss a kind of nourishment that no food can give you. The early hours are not just time, they are sacred time. A doorway to something subtle, delicate, alive. It's during these quiet hours, when the world is still asleep, that the soul is most receptive. To insight, to clarity, to connection. But when sleep stretches past its need, you miss the appointment with your own awakening. You awaken not with energy, but with guilt. Not with clarity, but with confusion. And worse, you forget what you were meant to remember. Because memory isn't just in the brain. It's in the body. It's in the breath. It's in the moments you greet the day with your full presence. Too much sleep clouds that presence. It makes you forget what you're truly here for. It makes you forget yourself. Ghazali once said that sleep is a mercy, but also a test. And like all things given in mercy, if misused, it becomes a veil. A veil that thickens until you no longer see your reflection clearly. You glance in the mirror, and something feels off. Not your face, but the energy behind your eyes. Like the person inside has drifted. And when that disconnection becomes routine, life begins to dull. Not because life has changed, but because your lens has become heavy. You become numb to your own potential. So ask yourself, when you wake up, do you feel pulled into the day, or pushed away from it? Are you eager to greet life, or do you feel buried by it? Because this quiet moment after waking, tells you more about your spiritual state than any journal or checklist. If you feel scattered, distant, empty, perhaps it's not your to-do list that needs adjusting. Perhaps it's your relationship with rest itself. There is a kind of sleep that revives, and a kind that buries. One heals, the other hides, and the difference is not in the length, but in the why behind it. Why are you sleeping? To restore, or to avoid? This is where Ghazali's lens pierces gently but deeply. He reminds us that many of our daily actions are just subtle forms of escape. Eating, scrolling, talking, sleeping, especially sleeping, because it is the most innocent of escapes. Socially acceptable, quiet, soft, but still, a form of running away. Running from what? From that lingering voice. The one that speaks when all distractions fade. The voice of dreams unfulfilled. Of guilt buried under laughter. Of time we know we're wasting. Of fears we've left unnamed. That voice grows loudest in silence. And what is sleep, if not the loudest kind of silence? But what if you stopped running? What if you paused, and turned inward, and listened? Not to the world, but to the ache inside. The ache that asks, why am I still tired? Why don't I want to be awake? Why do I feel so far from myself? Ibn Khaldun once said that humans need achievement to feel alive. When that feeling of progress disappears, so does our sense of self-worth. Sleep, then, becomes not just an escape, but a self-erasure. Each day we oversleep is not just time lost, but identity blurred. The bed becomes more than furniture. It becomes a coffin for ambition, a cradle for regret, and you feel it, each late morning, each forgotten sunrise, each breath that starts with a sigh. You know you could have done more. Not because someone told you, but because your soul remembers who you were meant to be. So here's the invitation, to remember, not just facts, but your own rhythm, your own spark, the version of you who used to rise with the sun, who dreamed big, who felt life rushing through your chest. That you is not gone, just asleep. And if you wake with intention, not by accident or alarm, you can meet them again. Not in a rush, but gently, daily, with presence, with ritual, with love. Let every morning become a return to yourself, a remembering of what matters, a realigning with the truth, that you are not tired because life is heavy. You are tired because your spirit is unheard. And sleep, when misused, becomes not a lullaby, but a lull. A pause in the music of your becoming. But the music hasn't stopped. It's waiting for you to open your eyes, to rise, to remember. There comes a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when the soul begins to whisper, "This isn't who I am." Not in anger, not in shame, just a soft recognition that something sacred inside you has been asleep too long. It's not the world that feels off. It's you, drifting away from your own essence. You wake up late, again. Not because you're lazy, but because waking up means facing something. Something heavy. Something real. Maybe it's the weight of unmet dreams. Maybe it's guilt wrapped in silence. Maybe it's just the fear of a day that feels like yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. Every morning you oversleep isn't just lost time. It's a subtle surrender to a life you no longer feel connected to a rhythm that's not your own. And that's the hidden danger. You don't notice the drift until one day you look in the mirror and ask, when did I stop feeling alive? Al-Ghazali spoke of veils, not just the outer ones, but inner veils that slowly dim the soul, layer by layer, comfort by comfort, until we forget what it feels like to burn with purpose. Sleep becomes one of those veils, not because rest is wrong, but because misused rest turns into spiritual sedation. You're not resting. You're numbing. You're hiding in softness because the sharpness of reality feels unbearable. But here's the truth. Every moment you choose to hide, you deepen the wound you're trying to avoid. And the irony? The very thing you're running from, the task, the truth, the pain, is often the key to your healing. We are not broken because we sleep too much. We sleep too much because something inside us has cracked quietly. Avicenna saw the body and soul as deeply intertwined. When the soul is burdened, the body responds. It slows down. It resists waking. It craves unconsciousness, not for restoration, but for refuge. But sleep can never solve a spiritual crisis. It can only delay its arrival. And eventually, what you've buried returns. In fatigue, in restlessness, in that quiet ache that no amount of sleep seems to erase. So what do? First, we tell the truth. We stop pretending we're just not morning people. We stop blaming the mattress, the room, the weather. We go inward and ask, why am I hiding? What am I afraid to meet in the morning? What dream have I abandoned that now haunts me in my sleep? The answers aren't easy, but they're holy, because they bring you back to yourself, back to the sacred conversation between your soul and the sunrise. The Sufis believed in spiritual wakefulness, yaqza, not just as an event, but as a state of being. A choice, made each dawn, to show up for your own life. To rise, even when it's hard. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Because pain, when faced, becomes a passage. But when avoided, it becomes a prison. And many of us are locked in soft prisons. Warm beds, muted alarms, comfortable routines that slowly strangle our inner fire. But you can walk out. Not all at once, but step by gentle step. Avicenna spoke of gradual healing. That real change doesn't erupt, it unfolds. So start small, not with a punishment, but with a promise. A promise to wake 10 minutes earlier. Not for productivity, not for pressure, but to be with yourself. To meet the day without rushing. To taste your coffee without checking your phone. To sit in silence and remember who you are. Because here's the miracle, the soul remembers. Even if you've been asleep for years, it remembers the light. It remembers the rhythm, and it longs to return. But you must lead it. Not with force, but with invitation. Create a morning that calls to you. Not one filled with noise and urgency, but one filled with peace. A book, a quiet stretch, a whispered prayer, a breath that says, I'm here. I'm awake. I'm alive. This is not just routine. It is ritual, sacred, transformative, and the more you honor it, the more your soul will respond. Soon, waking up won't feel like a battle. It will feel like a homecoming. You'll rise not because you have to, but because something inside you wants to greet the day. Because the fog begins to lift. The heaviness begins to melt. And in its place, clarity. Clarity that the pain you were avoiding was simply your heart calling you back. Back to presence. Back to truth. back to yourself. And this is how the healing begins. Not with dramatic shifts, not with grand resolutions, but with quiet mornings, with intentional wakefulness, with courage to face the light even when you feel unworthy of it. Because here's the secret: you are worthy, not because of what you produce, but because of who you are when you stop hiding. And when you rise, truly rise, you don't just reclaim your morning. You reclaim your soul. There's something sacred about a morning that begins in silence. No noise, no pressure, just you, and the stillness that lives before the world wakes. In that silence, you're not just a person getting ready for a day. You're a soul remembering how to live. Avicenna believed the early hours of the day held a unique energy, a spiritual clarity. He spoke of natural rhythm, how the body and spirit are attuned to the movement of the sun, the cycles of the earth, the sacred harmony of the universe. But when we oversleep, we miss that rhythm. We fall out of sync. And like an instrument left untuned, our inner song starts to sound off, distorted, tired, incomplete. You may not notice it at first, but over time, the disconnection grows. You feel heavy without knowing why, uninspired even after rest, disconnected from joy, even in moments that should fill you. That's the cost of ignoring your natural pulse. And slowly, you begin to understand. Waking up early isn't just about when you rise, but how you return to yourself. Because to truly wake up is not just to open your eyes, but to awaken the parts of you that have been forgotten. The parts that long for beauty, for meaning, for quiet purpose. And you don't need to do much. Sometimes, all it takes is one soft act of presence. Opening a window, feeling the morning air touch your skin, hearing birdsong instead of a screen, drinking your coffee like it's your first time tasting warmth, looking at the light without rushing away from it. These are not small things. They are the doorway back into your life. And with each morning you claim, you begin to rebuild something inside you. Not a routine, but a rhythm. Not a habit, but a home. And that rhythm slowly rewrites the story you've been telling yourself. That you're tired, that you're lost, that change is too far, too late. No, you are not broken. You are out of alignment. And mornings are your map back. Al-Ghazali once said that every action begins first as a thought, then a whisper, then a pattern. And if you repeat a pattern long enough, it becomes part of your soul. So what if you could repeat joy? Repeat intention? Repeat peace? Not because you force yourself, but because you fall in love with what it feels like to be awake. That's what this is about. Not productivity, not hustle, but aliveness. The ability to move through your day with a clear mind and an open heart. With a sense of wholeness that no amount of sleep can ever give. Because the truth is, the soul doesn't crave sleep. It craves meaning. And when your mornings are filled with meaning, you stop needing to hide inside your nights. You start sleeping to restore, not to escape. You start waking with anticipation, not dread. You begin to live in harmony with time, instead of feeling crushed by it. And slowly, beautifully, your entire life begins to shift. The foods you crave change. The way you speak to yourself softens. The fears that once haunted you in bed start to fade in the morning light. Because you are no longer running. You are arriving. And each sunrise becomes a sacred invitation. Come back. Come back to the life you've been missing. To the you that's been waiting. And here's the secret Avicenna understood. Change doesn't need to be dramatic. It needs to be consistent. He believed in gradual restoration. That the soul, like the body, heals not through shock, but through rhythm. So don't demand miracles overnight. Start with 10 minutes of stillness. Then 15. Then 20. Let your mornings become a sacred container. A space to return to what matters most. And in that space, you'll find something profound. Not motivation, not discipline, but love. A quiet love for the person you are when no one else is watching. A love for the soul that stirs just as the sky begins to glow. This is the place where transformation begins. Not at the gym, not in a planner, but in the softness of your breath as you wake without judgment. In the moment you realize you are worthy of a life that doesn't begin with self-loathing. That doesn't begin with dread. That doesn't begin with apology. But begins, instead, with reverence. With a gentle greeting. Welcome back. I missed you. Because the truth is, your soul is never far. Even when you've slept too long. Even when you've hidden too deep. It waits. It watches. And it whispers. Just open your eyes, and I'll meet you there. Sometimes, what you're running from is simply yourself. Not the world. Not the people around you. But the quiet truths you've buried under layers of comfort, routine, and distraction. Long sleep is often the most socially acceptable form of escape. It looks harmless, even necessary. But beneath the surface, it can be a kind of hiding. A slow retreat from the life you secretly feel unprepared to face. Imam Al-Ghazali once said that most of our habits are veils. They cover the heart. They distract the soul. They postpone the moment of truth. And sleep, especially excessive sleep, is one of those veils. It cloaks your restlessness. It silences the questions you're too tired or too afraid to answer. But the body remembers, and so does the soul. You wake up with a heavy chest, not because you overslept, but because you haven't lived, not fully. You didn't breathe deeply. You didn't face your fear. You didn't look yourself in the mirror and ask, what am I avoiding? And that question, that one simple question, can change your life. Because behind that avoidance, there's usually a deep longing. To begin, to forgive, to move, to become. But transformation begins with honesty. What are you running from? Is it the voice that reminds you of the time you've wasted? The goals you've set aside? The person you once wanted to be but no longer recognize? Is it guilt? Is it fear? Or is it simply the weight of a life that feels out of rhythm with your spirit? Ibn Khaldun once said that a person needs to feel useful to feel alive. Purpose isn't a luxury, it's oxygen. And without it, you begin to suffocate in the silence of your own days. You scroll, you sleep, you numb, but nothing satisfies. Because your soul is hungry, not for food or comfort, but for meaning. It wants to move, to love, to contribute, to feel the pulse of life rushing through your chest as you create, serve, and evolve. When you deny that need, sleep becomes a way of erasing time. And time is not something you can afford to erase. Every hour you spend asleep beyond your body's need is not just rest. It's avoidance. It's a door you didn't walk through. A sunrise you didn't witness. A breath you didn't take fully. But don't let that truth drown you in shame. Let it wake you up. Let it be the moment where you decide. This ends now. Not with punishment, not with blame, but with a gentle promise. I'm coming back to myself. Because deep down, you know it's not about discipline or productivity. It's about alignment. Alignment with the natural rhythm of your body. Alignment with the purpose your soul was created to fulfill. Avicenna taught that health, real health, is not just the absence of disease, but the presence of balance. Balance between action and rest. Between solitude and connection. Between silence and expression. And the longer you sleep beyond that balance, the more your soul begins to ache. Not loudly, but quietly, softly, like a plant that leans toward sunlight and never finds it. So what's the alternative? It's not to wake up in guilt. It's to wake up with gratitude. To say, I still have this morning. I still have breath in my lungs. I still have a chance. And with that chance, you do something radical. You begin again. You write. You move. You reach out. You take one small step toward the life you stopped believing was possible. And suddenly, you remember what it feels like to be alive. Not just awake, but aware. Aware of the breeze, the warmth of sunlight, the feeling of your own heartbeat reminding you, I'm still here. You don't need a full plan. You don't need to fix everything by tomorrow. You just need to start showing up. For yourself. For your mornings. For your soul. One choice at a time. And here's the paradox. The more you show up, the less you'll need to escape. Because the life you're building is no longer something you need to run from. It's something you want to return to. And that is freedom. Not the freedom to sleep whenever you want, but the freedom to live without needing to hide. To walk in the world with open eyes and an open heart. To say, I've been gone, but now I'm here. Here, with the sunrise. Here, with the truth. Here, with myself. Not perfect, not finished, but present. And that, perhaps, is the real awakening. Some mornings feel different. You wake up, and it's not just your eyes that open, it's something deeper. A quiet shift inside you. A pulse. A recognition. You step out of bed, and for the first time in a long time, you don't feel like you're dragging yourself into the day. Instead, you feel like you're returning. Returning to a rhythm you'd forgotten. A rhythm that existed before alarms, before screens, before self-doubt. The rhythm of the sun rising. The rhythm of birds singing to the silence. The rhythm of breath, deep, steady, sacred. This is not coincidence. It is your nature calling you back. Avicenna believed that the body heals when it's aligned with the natural order. He saw the early morning, not just as a time of light, but as a doorway to harmony. He taught that the air at dawn carries a certain purity, that the spirit, just like the lungs, breathes more freely when the world is still quiet. You've felt it before. That sacred stillness. When everything is soft and slow and full of meaning. When even the smallest sounds feel like whispers from the divine. That's not just peace. That's alignment. And in those moments, you realize something powerful. You were never meant to live in chaos. You were never designed to chase notifications, to drown in caffeine and exhaustion, to measure your worth in hours worked or emails answered. You were made to wake with the light, to greet the day with intention, to feel grounded in your body, rooted in your spirit. But we forget, we oversleep, we overstimulate. We disconnect from the very wisdom that made us. And so we suffer, not from lack of ambition, but from disconnection. From the soul, from the body, from meaning. Imam Al-Ghazali taught that every morning is a resurrection. A return from the death of sleep. A second chance. And like any second chance, it comes with a question. What will you do with this breath? Will you use it to scroll? To compare? To judge? Or will you use it to center? To listen? To move towards something real? This is not a productivity sermon. This is a soul invitation. Because waking early isn't just about getting more done. It's about becoming more aware of yourself, of your needs, of your calling. And the more you wake with presence, the more the rest of your day begins to shift. You eat differently. You speak more gently. You think with more clarity. Because the first light you allowed into your eyes became a light inside your chest. That's the secret Ibn Sina wrote of centuries ago. He didn't just study medicine, he studied awakening. And he knew that true healing doesn't come from pills or prescriptions, it comes from returning. Returning to what is natural, what is balanced, what is whole. So when you rise with the sun, you're not just getting up earlier, you're stepping into your original design. You are remembering, and that memory isn't stored in your mind alone. It lives in your muscles, your bones, your breath. It's why early mornings feel sacred, because they reconnect you with the rhythm of your soul. But this isn't just about mornings. It's about life. It's about choosing presence over patterns, awareness over avoidance, sacred over numb. It's about remembering that your life is a canvas, and each day is a brushstroke. And when you wake with intention, your art begins to change. You're not painting chaos. You're painting peace. You're not reacting. You're creating. And this creation, this becoming, starts not with massive change, but with small, steady choices. Like breathing before you speak. Like walking before the world wakes up. Like taking your coffee with silence instead of scrolling. These are your rituals, not because they're trendy, but because they're ancient, because they are human, because they make you feel alive, not in the loud, adrenaline-driven way, but in the soft, steady way of someone who has remembered their truth. And when you begin to live this way, your inner world transforms. You feel lighter, not because life got easier, but because you became more rooted. You know who you are. You know what you need. And you're no longer afraid to protect it. This is what healing looks like. Not perfection, but presence. Not control, but clarity. Not hustle, but harmony. And yes, there will be days you oversleep. Days you forget. Days you return to old habits. But even then, you're no longer lost. Because once you've tasted alignment, once you've seen the light of a day begun with soul, you always know the way back. And maybe that's what this entire journey is about. Not becoming someone else, but returning to who you were before the world told you to forget. Before the overthinking, before the noise, before the sleep that numbed instead of restored. You were always meant to be awake. Not just from your bed, but from within. And now, you are. There comes a moment in every soul's journey when it must choose. To stay asleep in comfort, or to rise into clarity. That moment rarely announces itself. It comes quietly. A whisper in the early light. A sigh while staring at your own reflection. A flicker of restlessness that says, there must be more. More than this heaviness. More than just surviving. More than the snooze button, the scroll, the cycle. And that whisper, it's not weakness. It's a memory of the self you were born to be. That version of you, the one who felt mornings were sacred, who could taste sunlight and hear silence, who saw every day as a canvas to be painted with meaning. That self is still here. Waiting, not for a miracle, not for permission, just for you. Because change isn't born from motivation. It's born from mourning, from grieving the years you lost to numbness, from feeling the weight of all the mornings you traded for sleep and daring to say, no more. This is not guilt. This is awakening. Al-Ghazali once said that true wisdom begins with recognizing your own heedlessness. Not to hate yourself, but to reclaim yourself. To return to the inner home you forgot you had. And that return begins with one morning. Not 10. Not a perfect month. Just one. One morning where you open your eyes, not just to light, but to life. You sit with the quiet. You sip your coffee slowly. You breathe. You feel. You don't rush. You listen. And in that silence, you realize something beautiful. You are not broken. You are buried. Beneath the routine, the roles, the restlessness, there is a soul that still burns bright. And all it needed was space. Stillness. A chance to speak. And what does it say? It says, thank you. Thank you for hearing me again. Because we all get lost. We all fall into patterns. We all forget. But some remember. Some decide that it ends here. That the sleep that once comforted them now confines them. That the bed that once gave warmth now becomes a weight. And they rise. Not to prove. Not to impress. but to return to themselves, to their purpose, to the rhythm of the divine. Ibn Sina believed that health was not merely the absence of illness, but the presence of harmony, of alignment between body, mind, and spirit. And that means healing doesn't start with punishment, it starts with compassion. So don't hate the years you overslept. Don't shame the seasons you felt numb. They were part of your becoming. But now, you are here. And that means something. It means you're ready. Ready to rebuild. Ready to remember. Ready to wake up. Not just at dawn, but in your life. And here's the most powerful truth of all. You don't need to do everything. You don't need to fix your entire life overnight. You just need to keep one promise. The promise that tomorrow, you will rise with the sun. And when you do, you will greet yourself like an old friend, with kindness, with awe, with presence. Because you are not your past. You are not your delay. You are not your forgetfulness. You are the one who chose to return. The one who dared to begin again. The one who opened the cage, not with force, but with faith. And now, the world is open to you. The air is different. The hours stretch wide. The soul breathes deeper. You are awake. And nothing is more sacred than that. So let this be your pact. Not with a schedule. Not with society. But with yourself. A quiet contract to rise in truth. To walk with purpose. To sleep with peace. And when the nights feel heavy again, when the pull of avoidance calls your name, remember this. There was a time when you forgot. But now, you remember. Not facts. Not plans. Not checklists. But something much deeper. You remember who you are. And that, more than anything, is what it means to be alive.